The following podcast is brought to you by the Station of the Cross. Thank you for listening.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTague, your rather stubborn and determined host, going to plan B, C, and D to get back online with you. I always said technology is a wonderful resource as long as it works. But we're back live now and on the air, and we're also in search of our distinguished guest, Cornelius Sullivan, sculptor and artist. You will want to look at his website, corneliussullivan.com, and you'll want to be amazed you will be amazed, I should say, by the quality of the work that he does. It is astonishing. What I wanted to say in the first segment was this, that the Catholic Church had been renowned for its commitment to beauty in every art, in every age, in every locale in the world, in painting and sculpture and music and architecture, investment in theater and literature. And it nourished generations across the centuries, across the millennia. And where are we now? Where are we now? If you look at what I would call St. Typicals in American suburbia and what someone called Our Lady of the Pizza Hut Theater in the Round Church. Cornelius, so I understand you're back on the line now.
I'm back.
Thanks be to God. As I said, you're so much more interesting to talk to talk about beauty than I am, because you've actually made beauty. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. When you're in the midst of the act of creation, when you're painting, when you're sculpting, are you aware of living out a vocation, of living out a call from God?
I suppose, in a general sense, that. I believe it's what I'm supposed to do with my life. But I've watched very closely as art has degenerated into form and content that's split apart. So we have conceptual art, and then we have abstract art. And that's different from our Western civilization, which has been built on Catholic art.
Right.
So the study of art history has devolved into the study of styles, but the study of Christian art history is always about meaning. And so we don't see that anymore. So art is used in politics now.
Right.
Anyway, I've seen this since I was young, and I think you had asked before about... In my upbringing, how did art come into my life? Well,
that's correct. Yes.
My mother and her best friend were the Altar Society of St. Zephyr's Church, just outside of Boston. And every Saturday, they would go and replace the altar cloths and vacuum the rugs. And I would run around in the back of the church. Mm-hmm. But the church was full of magnificent stained glass windows.
Right.
And sculptures.
Right.
And there was a remarkable painting of Sacred Heart. And He was looking straight ahead, and we kids used to fool around because wherever you went in the church, He was still looking at you.
He was still looking at you.
But I grew up with that. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm privileged to have a daughter-in-law of 10 years who grew up in Romania, and her grandfather broke into a church that was locked by the communists, and she saw the art in the church, and she decided that was going to be her life.
Oh.
Well, she just got a PhD, and she writes about and studies the Romanian churches, and some of them are wood, so they have frescoes on the inside, but also frescoes on the outside.
Right.
And she is so taken with the faith of young people in Romania now. Mm-hmm. And so she and my son Christian would go into the woods and find one monk left in the monastery.
Oh, my.
And she learned this obsolete language for her research. And then she said to this monk, well, I need more research on this and that. And then the next day, someone found her in a cafe and brought the book to her. And then another time, there were 20 monks. And when Christian and Alice left, when they were driving away, the monks were on the side of the road crying because she is a link between Eastern and Western art.
Yes.
And Islam did not succeed because of Vlad the Impaler.
Right.
And Romania was not converted by Protestants either. By the way, Alice teaches a class at the University of Michigan on Dracula.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, she, in a certain sense, she is a kind of a missionary, bringing forth treasures into the world that were hidden from the world for decades because of communist oppression. And I think the moral of the story is that the human desire for beauty and the human desire to express joy in the presence of God through art can't be successfully repressed indefinitely. Eventually, the hunger for beauty and the desire to make beauty emerge. Would you agree with that?
Yes. We're in a bad state in the art world now, and the Catholics and art in this country don't connect.
Right.
I've often said that American Catholics say, I don't know anything about art, and under their breath they say, I don't care.
Well, where does that come from, that not caring about art?
I suppose a materialism or a lack of, or some kind of ignorance.
Right.
Father, you know one of my favorite quotes that I include in all my writing about sacred art. It's from Pope Benedict. He says the only really effective apologia for Christianity comes down to two arguments, namely the saints the Church has produced and the art which has grown in her womb.
Yes.
So those two things, the saints and the art, inspire pilgrimage.
Yes.
Pilgrims go to Assisi because St. Francis was there. Present-day pilgrims go to the Sistine Chapel.
Right.
And I noticed in Rome they go and find a Bernini sculpture of Beato Ludovico Albertoni, a marble sculpture in Trastevere, and then they learn about the aristocratic Roman woman who gave all her wealth to the poor. And so I call them backpacking pilgrims for art, but they're retracing the steps of the pilgrims for faith from years ago. Now, opposed to that is what Martin Luther said. He said, never mind pilgrimages, just stay home. Just stay in your room and read your book. Well, that's not what Catholics believe.
Right, and you know, that's not even an intellectual approach to the faith. That's a cerebral approach to the faith. That's okay. I wanted to make a connection between
the theology of the body and sacred art, and you could even throw in subsidiarity. But all these things are about the real, and the idea, St. Paul says, you know, the universe is groaning, so that the redemption is, things are redeemed. So in teaching with Dr. Wallstein, who's the theology of the body expert. We taught a class, as you know, Father.
Right.
And it was theology of the body and sacred art, Renaissance art. It was Caravaggio and Titian.
Yes.
And so Wallstein would say, this is the new way to teach art. no, excuse me. This is the new way to teach theology. We teach theology with art.
With his distinctive Austrian accent, yes.
And his authority, but he really believed that. Well, and your guy Saint Ignatius and his spiritual exercises, it's about visualizing.
Right. The Jesuit spirituality calls upon the senses and the imagination, and that's. I just want to have a placeholder for our next topic, but I want you to finish your thought. But when you were running around a church as a boy, you didn't have much theology or spiritual sophistication, but you knew that you were in some place special. That you weren't in a parking lot, and you weren't in a grocery store. So you were going to make a connection earlier. You said with Luther.
Oh yeah. So Luther said just stay home. Mm-hmm. But everything adds to the idea of reverence and the idea of worship. Right. Rather than the emphasis on the communal meal. And right. I think when we reduce our theology to a happy meal where we get together and celebrate us and all of our usness, there's no urgent reason to make beauty. And yes, there's a meal aspect to the sacrifice of the Mass, but it's above all it's a sacrifice. And not even the Italians say we've sinned, let's eat. But when I think you have a lively sense of sin and then a great sense of redemption, then the desire to make great art becomes irresistible. Right, Father. In the days that we're having right now, it seems that it'd be great if you could have a heavy hitter guest to talk about redemption and renewal and penance. But the only thing that I can contribute to it is I can tell you what it looks like from looking at art of how things have degenerated in the Catholic Church from what I knew as a boy to where it is now. I went to Rhode Island School of Design after Boston College. And at Rhode Island School of Design in the mid-'60s, there was a man there who was working for the church, and he had some nuns working for him, and they were making felt banners. Now, at Rhode Island School of Design, it was a very serious place, and we all wanted to learn how to draw. And I was, a Catholic minority there, and I knew about Catholic art. And our minds were blown with the big slides of the cathedrals, and the Renaissance and Counter-Reformation art. And here is accepted now in what the church is putting in its bland office building-looking churches. Was this all these people, being paid by the church to make felt banners that say peace and love. Right. And then I flash ahead many years. I left Rhode Island School of Design. I had major in physics at Boston College, and then I went to be an artist. Well, years later, I ended up teaching some classes in drawing at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. That's this Graduate School of Architecture. And I stayed away from academia, and I thought, well, this is okay. So I went back to Rhode Island School of Design to finish my degree from many years before. Right. And so I signed up. They said, oh, yeah, you're a student in good standing. You just left. So I said, all right, sign me up. Okay. I knew that every art department in the country, this is 1989, was controlled by Marxist feminists. Oh, my. So the first day of class, the teacher was a feminist art critic from Manhattan. And she said, well, you should stop making art because you're a white male. Oh, and you're middle-aged. Oh. And I said, well, I don't know. I've been doing it since I was 10. I'm not a physicist. I don't know what else to do. We had that conversation for the whole semester. I got an A in the class. Okay. And the 20-year-old students were forced to listen to that, but it was probably good that they did. All right. Now, nothing has changed since that time. Right. That was the height of the feminist militancy 1989 and the early 90s. But nothing has changed. Now, I've done some research in art departments in Catholic universities. Mm-hmm. It's dreadful.
I've heard that in many places. It seems that a lot of these departments have amnesia, and that there's nothing to learn. You know, when you were dismissed, and this is back in 1989, as being, you know, too old and too white and too male. I mean, they like to say they would dismiss you as pale, male, and stale, as if you hadn't already made great art yourself, and as if you weren't. As if you weren't an heir to a magnificent and glorious art tradition, and I find that astonishing. Cornelius, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to ask the question, how does lack of beauty affect the Catholic soul? Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Tune in weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern for Sermons for Everyday Living. There's no better way to start your day than with spiritual formation from inspiring priests as they preach the gospel in the midst of your busy life. For details about upcoming episodes and for podcasts of past shows, visit thestationofthecross.com and click on Sermons for Everyday Living under the Programs tab. That's Sermons for Everyday Living, weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Do you enjoy praying with others through Catholic Radio? If Catholic Radio is a benefit to you and your loved ones, help us continue the good work of the Lord by donating today at thestationofthecross.com.
The Station of the Cross invites you to join us each day for the Liturgy of the Hours at 5 a.m., 3 p.m., and 9:30 p.m. Eastern. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17, St. Paul tells us to pray constantly. The Liturgy of the Hours is a meditative and efficacious way to foster habitual prayer. Also known as the Divine Office or Breviary, the Liturgy of the Hours is the daily prayer of the Church and is made up of readings from sacred scripture, writings from saints and theologians, and small reflections. The Office of Readings is also read at 3 p.m. Eastern and helps us to unite in prayer with the Universal Church. For details about each hour and more information about the Liturgy of the Hours, visit thestationofthecross.com. We hope you will join us for this daily prayer of the Church each day at 5 a.m., 3 p.m., and 9:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Station of the Cross.
Did you know you can listen to our great Catholic programming even when you're not in range of our station? Visit thestationofthecross.com, then click the Listen Live button on our homepage.
You're listening to the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network. Call into the Catholic Current this hour at 1-877-511-5483. Each morning, the Catholic Current sends out a short survey on the topic for today's show so that you can share your thoughts and any questions you might have. This is a great way to participate, especially if you aren't able to call in live. A few of the responses will be read over the air to add to the discussion, so make sure you sign up to receive our emailed survey at thestationofthecross.com.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTague of the Society of Jesus, your daily host on the Catholic Current, where we plug into the truth of Jesus Christ and His Catholic Church. You're listening live on the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network, where we proclaim the truth with clarity and charity. Our topic today is, do Catholics really need beauty? And our distinguished guest is sculptor and painter Cornelius Sullivan. Cornelius, one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this segment is, what does it do to the Catholic soul? What does it do to the human spirit to be deprived of beauty?
I think it's insidious, but it's big, and it may not be noticeable right away. But the thing is, bad music hurts your ears.
Right.
Bad art goes to some place in the back of your brain, some place where everything is dull and sits there.
Right.
But the thing is, what's missing is that great art is capable of being transcended. It's great art is sacramental.
Right. Right. We can use the visible and the physical to pass to the invisible, but that which is even more real. I know the first time I walked into Sacred Heart Cathedral in Newark, New Jersey, I was 18 years old, and I nearly blacked out the first time. I just looked up and was transported into heaven. And I remember there was a little child who had walked in behind me, and he cried out, "God lives here."
Well,
I'm wondering if he went to a church in suburbia with the theater in the round design and polyester vestments and out-of-tune guitars and those banners proclaiming that Jesus is the butterfly who never dies, and so, sacred vessels that are wine glasses from Walmart. I wonder if then he would have cried out, "God lives here."
Well, he wouldn't have known whether he was in an apartment building or a grocery store or a bank.
Right, or a waiting room for the dentist.
Right, because architects in the height of modern architecture at its worst, the architects cared about their design and geometry. Mm-hmm. They didn't care if the user knew where the front door was or whether it was a bank or a church. Mm-hmm. But they were just reflecting the culture in general and what the church had done, emphasizing the meal and turning the priests around, so the priests have to be part entertainer, comedian.
Right.
And it's a different thing. And so that the worship became kind of forgotten, and art can remind parishioners that about prayer.
I think we've lost that sense of wonder. I mean, when you walk into a great cathedral, for example, or a noble monastery, it's undeniable that this world can't be all that there is. And there seems, Cornelius, do you think it was by accident that we just started getting a crop of ugly churches? Was it dumb luck that someone decided to paint the sanctuary of a new church, which I saw recently, the kind of orange that your grandmother would like when she was serving tea to her friends? Was that by accident, or was that part of a larger movement?
No, I think it was part of a larger movement, and I know that in Dr. Wallenstein's introduction to the theology of the body, he pinpoints that thinking in Enlightenment philosophy.
Sure.
Here's a quote from him, a couple of sentences. Descartes' attack on the body and taking the body off the cross led to disembodied art. Oh, that's me. I'm reading.
Sounds like something you would say.
No. The contrast is between what is real and what is a mere symbol.
Right.
The cross is a symbol, and you can make up your own meaning. It's like abstract art.
Right.
It reminds me of what Catholic writer Flannery O'Connor said at a distinguished literary dinner, at which she remained too shy to speak, until a woman, knowing Flannery was Catholic, said, "The Eucharist, what a nice symbol." O'Connor said, "Well, if it's a symbol, then to hell with it."
That's exactly right. If great Catholic art isn't just decoration. It's telling a truth. And there used to be a time when Catholic art was meant to point to the truths of the faith, and you could pass through the art to what the art pointed to. And we saw that in our language and our vestments and our music and our incense and so on. And that all seems to be taken away now. And so now where, okay, I'm here to meet my Sunday obligation, and there's no place for my senses, and there's no place for my mind, and I just have to sit here for 45 minutes and then put the envelope in the basket. And so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to try to entertain each other so that the time can pass, not too disagreeably. The British philosopher Roger Scruton had an interesting observation. He said this. He said, beauty is vanishing from our world because we live as though it did not matter. Could you respond to that, please, Cornelius?
Yeah, I was a respondent to Roger Scruton on the stage when he was at Ave Maria University, along with Dr. Mikhail Wallstein. And here's a 1-hour BBC video called "Why Beauty Matters."
Right, it's available on YouTube. Yes.
Yeah, his topic was supposed to be Face of God. Here's a small book about that, but he didn't talk about that at all. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I responded to his "Why Beauty Matters," which was very sad and very depressing because he chronicled how art had really gone to hell. But in that video, I found something. And what I found was the musician Pergolesi wrote his Stabat Mater.
Oh, yes. We very often heard during Lent and in particular Good Friday.
Yeah, and Scruton said that the composer became the man on the cross. Now, that sounds very Catholic.
Right.
Roger's not Catholic. A lot of his ideas are very Catholic.
Yes.
But that's like Flannery O'Connor saying the Eucharist is not a symbol. So in that, I found that I tried to make a connection and say that what saves you from despair is the Blessed Virgin in art.
Yeah.
And I concluded with a quote from Pope Benedict that I love about the Blessed Virgin, and this is at the end of an article I wrote about sacred art and modernism. But anyway, here's the quote from Pope Benedict about the Blessed Virgin. The languages into which the gospel entered when it came to the pagan world did not have such modes of expression, but the idea of the Pietà, the mother grieving for her son, became the vivid translation of this word. In her, God's maternal affliction is open to view. In her, we can behold it and touch it. She is the compassio of God, displayed in a human being who has let herself be drawn wholly into God's mystery. So he's talking about, in the Pietà, we can see the maternal affliction of God. So God loves us in that way, too.
Sure.
She's the compassio of God.
Right. There's a sense in which great Catholic art is a revelation. It's a proclamation. It's a way of telling the gospel. And my concern nowadays, Cornelius, is that we're at a point where the beauty of the Virgin Bride of Christ is being obscured. It's being obscured by bad art and bad preaching and bad music. And worst of all now, it seems that dirt and filth is being flung at the church, who is the Virgin Bride of Christ, by tragic and wicked behavior. It breaks my heart as a priest, as a theologian, as a man. How does that affect you, the ugliness that's taking place, the acts of ugliness against the church? How does that affect you as an artist?
It's very disheartening, to say the least.
Sure.
I think it's very sad for those who do it, who perpetuate it, and for people who have to look at it. I think when you're asking for, secondary causes for the state we're in, I think the church the art of the church has a reverence for transforming the physical into the transcendent. And with Descartes and Enlightenment philosophy, the mind was prized over the body. And and this was the quote I was looking for from Dr. Wallstein. But the reason to do that is because of the impulse to control nature. Yes. Well, that goes to that matter is not important, and that goes to controlling women's bodies. It goes to controlling our nature. Making up our own gender, and it's a control thing, but it absolutely has destroyed art. So that art without form is conceptual art. I had a great thought. What was it? I'll write it down, and then it will be art. Here's the Wallstein quote. The ancient Gnostics found themselves in a demonic, anti-divine universe. Matter was evil. Right. Yet the truly bottomless pit is opened only by the Cartesian universe with its complete indifference to meaning. Matter is, quote, mere matter, sheer externality. It is value-free. The reason for this indifference of matter to meaning lies in the rigorous reconstruction of knowledge under the guise of the ambition for power over nature.
Right, and that ambition to reduce nature to mere stuff, to be subjected to human will, that's the act of one who doesn't see that he has a creator. Once you realize that you're a creature and you're living in the world that your loving Father made, you're going to behave very differently, and you're not going to act as if it's your right to break everything. Speaking of breaks, we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the restoration of the beauty for the greater glory of God, the good of our neighbor, and the salvation of our soul. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This Divine Mercy Reflection is from the Diary of St. Maria Faustina. In paragraph 1276, St. Faustina records her most intense pain and suffering and its cause. She writes, September 16, 1937. At 8 o'clock, I was seized with such violent pains that I had to go to bed at once. I was convulsed with pains for 3 hours. No medicine had any effect on me. At times, the pains caused me to lose consciousness. Jesus had me realize that in this way I took part in his agony in the garden, and that he himself allowed these sufferings in order to offer reparation to God for the souls murdered in the wombs of wicked mothers. The sin of abortion was the cause of St. Faustina's most intense pain and suffering. We must pray and fast for an end to abortion. We must also let those who have had an abortion know of the mercy and peace available only from Jesus in the sacrament of reconciliation. This Divine Mercy Reflection is brought to you by the Station of the Cross.
The Catechism defines an indulgence as a remission before God of the temporal punishment due to sins whose guilt has already been forgiven. But is it biblical to say punishment remains after God has forgiven our sins, and that we can do something to satisfy it? I think it is. For example, David is forgiven of his sin in 2 Samuel 12, but yet must suffer the death of his son. Even Jesus teaches in Luke 12 that the servant who sins without full knowledge will be punished, but in a lesser degree. It is such temporal consequences that indulgences remit. Exercising her power to bind and loose, the Church grants indulgences to help her children heed St. Paul's exhortation in Philippians 2:12, work out your salvation. So, is the Catholic understanding of an indulgence biblical? You bet it is. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
You're listening to the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network. Call into the Catholic Current this hour at 1-877-511-5483. Shortly after today's show, visit our page for the Catholic Current at thestationofthecross.com. Here you'll find a link to Father McTague's recommended reading list and a link for downloading the program so that you can share it with your family and friends.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTague of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we plug into the power of Jesus Christ and His Catholic Church. You're listening to us on the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network, where we proclaim the truth with clarity and charity. Our question today is, do Catholics really need beauty? And our distinguished guest is Cornelius Sullivan, painter and sculptor whose work you can see at corneliussullivan.com. In this segment, we're going to talk about how beauty might be restored for the greater glory of God, for the good of our neighbor, and for the salvation of our own soul. You know, Cornelius, we have a survey sent out every morning to our listenership, and we take some of the responses back and we read them on the air. I want to read to you a response from our listener named Renee. Renee writes, "Seeing the miracle of life in nature, trees, flowers, birds, all animal, I see the Creator and His design." She goes on to say, "In man-made beauty, I see God's hand, guidance, inspiration, and power." What do you think of that?
No quarrel with the first part.
Right.
When you look at Catholic art and Western civilization, it's magnificent.
Yes.
You had mentioned the idea that we are creatures.
Yes.
And that, I think, in relation to art, that's a good thing to realize. Mm-hmm. And what a relief it is to not be God.
Yeah.
But the conceptual art, it kind of makes it like, my thoughts or
right.
or art. I think about the idea of trying to get back to some to the idea of making some great art. I think it is possible. I think it requires study.
Yes.
Of great art. When I have students, sometimes there's students who have ability.
Right.
They can draw. They have good eyes. They don't know what art is. The only way you know what art is by looking at lots of art.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking gradually. Now, what happened is, what went wrong is that the idea of God-given ability went away from art. So in the guild in the Renaissance, then Michelangelo was apprenticed late at 14 years old. Mm-hmm. And he swept the floor. Well, he didn't so much. He was precocious and rebellious. Mm-hmm. But you swept the floor, you learned how to mix colors, and you learned how to do everything. Under the tutelage of a master, you were an apprentice.
Right.
And when you were 20, maybe you could go on your own and make some of your own works. Until then, you copied. And copying is how you learn. Now, in our society, we have apprenticeships are required for doctors. We don't want them to kill us. And architects, we don't want the roof to fall in. But it went away from art.
Right. And apparently art isn't important, and as long as I express myself, then you can take what I give you and put it up on the refrigerator in the kitchen and give me a participation prize because I made art.
That's right. That's what it is. Because the idea of God-given ability disappeared, so everyone is an artist. And Freddie brings home scribbles from the first grade. They're put on the refrigerator for his self-esteem. Well, Freddie, that sucks. Learn how to draw. It is possible to learn. It is possible to learn quality, to recognize quality. Right. But it's not in our educational system anymore.
No.
It's completely gone. It has not completely gone from music because bad music hurts our ears, but bad art we tolerate. We put it on the refrigerator, and then when Freddie's not looking, it's in the trash.
Right.
But until there's an idea that we have in the church and in Western civilization, we have a great history of art in all mediums, and children can learn, and we should give them a chance to be great, to do something important, and we need it.
Right, and you can't give what you don't have. I mean, you could teach people to draw. I certainly couldn't. I don't have the God-given ability. I haven't studied as you've had. I think one of the reasons that people tolerate bad churches is that after a certain point, they don't know any better. I think I have friends who've had young children, and they go to Our Lady Help of Bingo in suburbia somewhere, and they have no sense whatsoever of what a beautiful church looks like. As far as they know, it's got green or red carpet, and it's got fake paneling, and it's got shapeless statues and geometric stained glass windows, and they literally have no idea of what they're missing. And I think the fact that they're missing that impoverishes their souls. So here's my question for you, Cornelius, in the time we have left. What do we do about that? If you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a priest, what do you do to hand on the heritage and bring those souls back to life?
Well, it's education.
And by education, I'm assuming you don't mean go to school Monday through Friday.
No, it's education that's inspired.
Right.
Young people and students can tell if you're excited about something.
Yes.
And sometimes that's the best thing you have to offer. Not technical, but, oh, look at this. This is really good. And that's what I remember from my teachers. I think everybody has to have at least one great teacher.
Yes.
And that's how we learn to be, who we're supposed to be. So,
well, there's no substitute for a guide. When I was living in London, I went to a museum to see the centenary celebration of a painter from the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and I enjoyed it. And then I went with a friend who was an art historian who really almost took me by the hand and brought my eye to things that I wouldn't have known that I was overlooking. And that's what we need now is a retrieval of the arts and the love and the faith and the joy and the charity and the purity that inspires, and then gladly hand that on to the next generation. That's what I believe that we need to do, because business as usual, Cornelius, I believe, isn't doing anybody any good.
No.
No.
No, the church really should sponsor art. It has been the great sponsor, patron of art.
And we have to stand before the world, and we have to ask the Lord to purify our souls, purify our senses, and purify our hearts so that we can be inclined to wash clean again the virgin bride of Christ who's been besoiled by the world and by wicked people and sin, and say, look at what God has given us. Look at the gifts. Let us rejoice. Let us celebrate. Let us make beauty again for the greater glory of God, for the good of our neighbor, and for the salvation of our souls. I want to thank Cornelius Sullivan for being our special guest on this episode of The Catholic Current. Look at the art he's made at CorneliusSullivan.com. I'm Father Robert McTague of the Society of Jesus, your host. You've been listening to The Catholic Current, where we plug into the power of Jesus Christ and His Catholic Church. Tune in tomorrow where we'll have another episode of The Catholic Current. May God bless you, keep you from all harm and every evil. Go in peace. Please pray for me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Station of the Cross. The Station of the Cross is a listener-funded nonprofit organization. If this podcast has helped you in your spiritual journey, please consider making a donation. Donations can be made through our website, thestationofthecross.com, or by calling 1-877-888-6279. You can also donate right through our free iCatholic Radio mobile app. Thank you for listening to and supporting the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.